Left of the box. I have a story that I'm going to be covering in some depth. A teenager, 16-year-old in Oklahoma, non-binary child, is now no longer part of this world, in part due to the stochastic terrorism of Chaya Rychek, but it's not like she'll ever admit to that. She's actually trying to play the victim right now. And yeah, this story hits me hard as somebody who is non-binary for so many different reasons. Like, I look at this poor child, and when I was 16, I didn't know what non-binary was. And they knew who they were. They had that opportunity to express themselves, and for it to be taken away so violently. This hatred, for what? They didn't do anything to anyone. So from Aaron Reed, last month I reported that Chaya Rychek, the libs of TikTok, was appointed by Ryan Walters to make schools safer in Oklahoma. That's not exactly working out the way that they had, well, it's working out the way that they had hoped, but it's not exactly making schools safer. 1 month later, a trans teen is dead after a year of transphobic bullying. Their name was Nex. Next was a gender-fluid trans teenager who suffered horrific bullying over their trans identity and is now dead after being beaten in a restroom. Libs of TikTok and Ryan Walters said they'd make students safe. Which students? Just 1 month ago, I wrote on how State Superintendent Ryan Walters, who himself has been viciously anti-trans, appointed Libs of TikTok as part of a plan to make schools safer. Ravana was on my live stream, and we talked about this when it first happened, that, the place where she had bomb threats sent to, got them to be targeted with bomb threats, the Oklahoma School District and all that sort of stuff, then turned around and hired her to be part of their council. I was surprised to find out that these days that's how you apply for jobs, is to, send in bomb threats. And this is the letter from the superintendent, Ryan Walters. No one has done more to expose what the radical left is all about than Chaya Rychek and Libs of TikTok. Hers is a powerful voice to protect Oklahoma kids from porn in schools and woke indoctrination. I'm proud to have her on our team. I don't see how she has anything to do with porn in schools. Because being queer does not mean porn. That they're not connected. That's not how that works. Libs of TikTok Chaya Rychek has famously often had violent threats and bomb threats follow her posts. She posed proudly with a paper pointing it out. How could this have gone any differently? One of the very first teachers targeted by Libs of TikTok was Nex's favorite teacher in 2022. Meanwhile, the Oklahoma Department of Education under Ryan Walters put out a video calling trans people unsafe in bathrooms and trans bathrooms access an assault on truth. How could this have gone any differently? When language like this is used, what happens next? Legislatures in Oklahoma have done the same. Senator Jett compared parents of trans kids to those who kill their kids. Next will be buried, we have learned today, under their name, their right name, the same name that legislators, hate influencers, and the superintendent of Oklahoma tried to erase. 25 years ago, another LGBTQ+ student was killed. He also succumbed to a head injury 6 days later. That student was Matthew Shepard, and his death changed society. It took some time. How many more trans people have to die for their deaths to do the same? How many more young people have to die? How many more Eden Knights? How many more Brianna Gays? How many more Ariana Mitchells? And you can find the family's GoFundMe. And yes, Aaron Reed is a transgender journalist. If you can, please subscribe to her Substack. So the serfs had tweeted this out. Chaya Rychek lives at TikTok, is trying to downplay her own work. She didn't just post a TikTok, she labeled a teacher as a groomer without any evidence. Now that a non-binary student who admired the teacher was killed, she's trying to walk it back. I'm not entirely sure how to say the high school's name. I think it's Owasso. So I'm just going to go with Owasso. I'm sorry if I'm getting it wrong, but I am horrible with names. The Independent is now claiming the deceased student greatly admired the teacher I posted about 2 years ago. They're literally now just making fun of stuff, hoping their readers... they're literally just making stuff up. Hoping their readers believe it. Unbelievable. Chaya Rychek famously makes stuff up for people to believe. And unfortunately, a lot of the people who follow her do tend to believe all the bullshit she posts. Trans activists are now spreading the lie that I'm responsible for a non-binary teen getting killed at school because 2 years ago I posted a TikTok from a teacher in that school. They're lying about me to incite one of the followers to physically harm me. That's their goal. You see, it's already worked the other way around, Chaya. You've been inciting hatred. You've been the stochastic terrorist. And now that that has played out, you're trying to claim victim? And from the Libs of TikTok account, if your parents don't accept you for who you are, fuck them. I'm your parents now. Oklahoma middle school teacher. This teacher was let go last week after complaints of grooming, and this TikTok, others containing questionable content, were brought to the principal's attention. So unwarrantedly labeled somebody as a groomer, and that teacher was eventually had to leave their job. A teacher that this student admired. And so we got a thread here from Alejandra Caraballo. In now deleted tweets, Lip of TikTok previously targeted this school district and got a middle school teacher fired for being supportive of LGBTQ students. She also incited bomb threats in a nearby Tulsa school for weeks. She's now appointed to oversee book banning in Oklahoma. So a non-binary teenager was brutally beaten to death in Oklahoma school by their classmates in the school bathroom. And the details of that are quite horrific. So content warning going forward as I get more into this story. The local news source dead names and misgenders them. No other media has investigated this thoroughly. The school did nothing and did not call an ambulance. Next died the next day in the hospital. In now deleted tweets, Live the TikTok previously targeted school, as we know. And the full interview with the mother is heartbreaking, and we will get to that article in just one moment. So next, Benedict, a 16-year-old non-binary citizen of the Cherokee Nation, was beaten up at a high school and died the next day. The anti-2S LGBTQ principal and teachers didn't even call an ambulance or the cops. Next, Benedict should still be alive. Next deserved not only a safe and nurturing environment to learn, but an environment that actively disrupted anti-2S TGNC plus rhetoric and worked to ensure the vulnerable students were safe. Just a beautiful child. And yet the right will always just time after time say, wasn't us. You know, we might have targeted the school, we might have called them groomers, we might have insinuated that they were harming children in all ways that you can imagine. But the fact that this child was then beat up for living their life, for just being who they were, well, that had nothing to do with us. This is the goal. And, you know, should the Republicans get into power with Project 2025 on the way, it's going to get worse. Even here in Canada, there was a recent article I covered in the last live stream where CSIS, our intelligence services, says there's most likely going to be more attacks on people like me, non-binary people, gender queer people, LGBTQ plus people, because the stochastic terrorism keeps on ramping up because our conservatives, the Republicans, keep on playing into the right-wing rhetoric. The Premier of Alberta bringing Tucker Carlson on stage. Tucker Carlson has been an influence to a lot of these hate-motivated attacks. And yet, That's who the right is putting up on a pedestal saying this is where we need to go. And they do this to rile up their base. And what do you think happens when they do this? When they constantly fill the heads of these people that queer folks are dangerous, that they're out to harm your children, that if you want to keep your kids safe, you have to do something about it. What do you think happens? This sort of tragedy happens. So this is from The Independent. Oklahoma banned trans students from its bathrooms. Now a bully student is dead after a fight. Whenever Oklahoma teenager next Benedict was bullied at school for being transgender, their mother, Sue Benedict, would encourage the 16-year-old to rise above their tormentors. I've said you've got to be strong and look the other way because these people don't know who you are, Miss Benedict told The Independent in a phone interview. I didn't know how bad it had gotten. The bullying had started in earnest at the beginning of 2023 school year, a few months after Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt signed a bill that required public school students to use the bathrooms that matched their sex listed on their birth certificates. The sex on my birth certificate is X. Actually got that legally changed. So how would this apply to me? A few weeks ago, on 7th of February, the bullying allegedly erupted into violence when Nex suffered severe head injuries during a physical altercation at the Owasso High School, according to Owasso Police Department. Sue Benedict told The Independent she was called to school that day to find Nex badly beaten with bruises all over their face and their eyes, with the scratches on the back of their head. Nex told her that they and another transgender student at Owasso High School had been in a fight with 3 older girls in the bathroom. Nex was knocked to the ground during the fight, hit their head on the floor, according to their mother. Miss Benedict said she was furious that the school had failed to call an ambulance or the police. She said the school then informed her Nex was being suspended for 2 weeks. So no ambulance when a student hit their head on the floor, even though I'm sure they know of this thing called concussions, and then that could be quite horrible, or that it should be checked out when this type of assault happens. So the adults in the situation stood by and do nothing, and in fact punished that student, suspended them for being a target of hate. She took Nex to Bailey Medical Center in Owasso for treatment. They spoke to a police school resource officer at the medical facility and were discharged. That night, Nex went to bed with a sore head and eventually fell asleep while listening to music, Miss Benedict said. On 8 February, Nex was getting ready to go to Tulsa with Miss Benedict for an appointment when they collapsed in the family living room. Miss Benedict called an ambulance and EMT officers arrived to find Nex had stopped breathing. Nex was declared dead that evening in the hospital. In a statement, the Owasso Police Department said they were conducting a very active and thorough investigation of the time and the events that led up to the death of the student. Owasso PD spokesperson Nick Boatman told The Independent that police were awaiting results of toxicology and autopsy report from the Oklahoma Medical Examiner's Office before determining whether anyone will be charged. Mr. Boatman said all charges will be on the table once the cause of death was confirmed. I'd love to see the people who were, the cause of death to actually be punished for this. To see Chaya actually held accountable for all the hate that she's been spreading, for all the stochastic terrorism that she's been doing, for all the harm she has caused. Instead, the Oklahoma School Board rewarded her with a job to protect students that she was targeting. This shouldn't make sense in a world where we want to be inclusive, where we want to grow and develop. Like, this doesn't make any sense for this world when objectively people know what's happened is wrong. And yet so often the right wing gets away with it over and over again, causing harm, they're the inspiration for mass shootings all the time. And yet nothing has been done to reel that in. The governments just shy away. They're too afraid that the right will say, you're trying to suppress our freedom of speech. Should they do anything to try to control what's happening on the right. Instead, the right is just free to keep on getting as bad as it wants. An Owasso Police public school spokesperson declined to provide the information about the assault or the school's response when contacted by The Independent, citing the active police investigation. LGBTQ advocacy group have described Nex's death as a hate crime and linked it to the hateful rhetoric spewed by the leaders in our state and the Libs of TikTok account run by far-right social media influencer Chaya Rychek. Ms. Rychek, a New York-based former real estate agent, became a cause célèbre among conservatives for using her Libs of TikTok account, I think they mean celebrity, to post and edited anti-trans videos that target public school teachers and librarians. An Owasso high school teacher who Nex had greatly admired resigned in 2022 after they were featured in one of Ms. Rychek's posts. So a person who Nex looked up to, admired, somebody who supported Nex for who they were, was forced to leave their job due to this targeted hate. Whenever you lose a teacher like that, the school becomes less safe for LGBTQ plus students. Because not all teachers are supportive. Not all teachers will be there for queer students. So when you're in a supportive environment, to have one, it goes such a long way to keeping queer students from harm. It keeps them from harm. To have that support, to have that acknowledgement, to have that place that they can go to be safe, especially for students that don't have that safety at home. Nex had that safety at home. They were one of the lucky ones. But so many students, so many children don't have that safety at home. And then to go to school and have teachers that you can feel safe and supported with, then be forced to leave their jobs, make schools less safe for them, and then they have nowhere else to go. Ms. Rychek did not respond to a request or a comment by The Independent on X. She denied any link to the cause to the death and said she was unjustly blamed for a murder. Yeah, Rychek claiming victim in this one. Like, oh no. Like, I only had the school targeted and her teacher had to step down because of all the harassment and stuff that they were sending. And then, I actually got hired onto the school board there and all my anti-trans stances and the push to have, transgender bathroom bills put in place and all that sort of stuff. But I had nothing to do with this. Yeah. When you're old school, you don't always understand it. Like many parents, Sue Benedict and her husband Walter at times struggle to understand the nuances of Nex's gendered fluidity. Miss Benedict is Nex's biological grandmother and raised them since they were 2 months old along with 5 other children. She formally adopted Nex a few years ago. She told The Independent that Nex was always understanding if she used an incorrect pronoun or called Nex by their birth name. Nex did not see themselves as male or female, Miss Benedict said. Nex saw themselves right down the middle. I was still learning about it. Nex was teaching me that. When you're old school, you don't always understand it, her husband Walter told The Independent. But it would be very boring if we were all the same. It's on the inside that matters the most. Nex Benedict with their cat Zeus, straight-A student, was going places, their mother said. The family, who traced part of their roots to the Choctaw Nation, encouraged open discussion about questions of gender and identity. I was very open with my children to be who and what they thought was best, Miss Benedict said. They could talk to me about anything as long as they respect goes both ways. A child needs to figure out who they are and what they want to be, and you cannot force it upon them. This is something a lot of people on the right struggle to understand because they are always about parental rights. And it's like, no, you have a responsibility to children. You don't have rights over your children. And one of those responsibilities is to help that child figure out who they are. But the right gets so upset when their children become anything they don't want them to be, that the parents want programmed for them. The parents state, this is why I brought you into the world. This is my image of what you should be. And if you're anything other than that, well then. The right just doesn't seem to understand that children are people. They're individuals. They have, their own sense of who they are, of what they want to be, separate from what their parents are. But so much of this hate in the schools and the book bannings and the bills and the don't say gay stuff is all about parents wanting to force their children to conform to something they're not, to force them to conform to what the parents want them to be, instead of respecting who the child is and allowing them to explore that. Nex's sister, Malila, who is also a member of the LGBTQ community, told The Independent in an interview that Nex's fluid gender identity was not an issue nor anything that anybody cared about within the family. Nex was very, very fortunate to have a family like that. Nex was a straight-A student who enjoyed drawing, reading, playing video games, Ark and Minecraft, and was devoted to their cat Zeus. Miss Benedict said, I was so proud of Nex. They were going someplace. They were so free, she said. All the potential of who this child was, who they were going to be, it's gone. Because some people didn't like the bathroom they were in or felt that they should be conformed to a specific gender. Because Nex dared to be something other than what they were comfortable with, that Nex dared to be themselves. In April 2022, Owasso High School teacher Tyler Wren was featured in a surreptitiously filmed Libs of TikTok post telling students, if your parents don't accept you for who you are, F them. The incident sparked backlash in the small Oklahoma city of 40,000 residents, and Mr. Wren resigned from Owasso public school system. Nex was very angry about it, Miss Benedict said. Miss Benedict said that the teacher who encouraged debate about gender issues were not promoting sexualized content. They were allowing the students to be who they are. Miss Benedict said she first became aware that Nex was being bullied at school in early 2023. They'd go straight to their room and put it on their radio, and I'd say, okay, you gotta decompress for a little bit, and then come out of it and talk about it. Miss Benedict said she remains furious at the school for failing to call police or seek medical attention for Nex, and wants to see children who allegedly assaulted Nex punished. This was a failure of all the adults in the school to not call an ambulance, to not inform the parents of what happened. That is their responsibility. If they're teachers and principals and stuff at the school, their responsibility to the children is to keep them safe, is to make sure that they get the medical attention they need. And they failed to do that, and because of that, a child died. I can't imagine what it's like for their mother. The guilt that she must be feeling. So many people push kids to be one thing, and you've got to let them find themselves and be who they should be, Miss Benedict said. Society has got to see them as they are, accept them, and go on, because we are all people. See, this type of stuff was never really talked about, never mentioned when I was in high school. This idea of just being who you are, or even knowing that non-binary was an option that wasn't... Let me just switch screens for a moment. As doomer as all of this seems, I think people need to be reminded of how far we have come. To be able to have these discussions, to be able to have this language, to be able to have students that can express themselves, to have safe homes, to have parents who might not understand but be trying to. This wasn't a thing when I was a teenager. We have come so far in the past couple decades when it comes to acceptance, when it comes to understanding, when it comes to people being able to express who they are. And the statistics show it. 20% of children, Gen Z, identify LGBTQ+. See, I've always been non-binary, but if you were to give me a quiz or some sort of survey back when I was in high school, I wouldn't have said that because I wouldn't even known what that meant or how it could be a thing. But as we become more accepting, the hateful people, the people that want society to conform to their rigid stereotypes, they're going to start lashing out even harder. And it's one of the things where we have to keep on going. We have to keep on pushing forward because it's not as simple as 2 steps forward and 1 step back. It's more like 5 steps forward and 4 steps back. But we are gaining ground. We are winning in the end. And it's to the place now where so many people now know the truth, now know what it means to be non-binary, now know what it means to be transgender, to be queer. So many young people have learned it and accepted it and identified with it and have been free to express themselves. There's no going back at this point. You can't put that many people back in the closet. You can't uneducate them once they know this stuff. You can't take that away from them. So there is no going back to what these right-wingers want, which is why they have to become more authoritarian, why they have to become more brutal. There is no going back to what society thought it was 50 years ago. And that's a good thing. So many young people are free to express themselves. Like, I was fortunate that when I was in high school, I could tell my mom, it's like, I'm definitely interested in boys, but I haven't ruled out girls. And my mom had zero problem with it. If I was still with my stepfather at the time, might have been a few more issues. But even as I got older and I was in a relationship with my girlfriend and she had a husband and we're polyamorous, and I told my mom about it, and my mom didn't necessarily understand it, but because I mentioned, it's like, oh yes, I have a girlfriend and she has a husband, and my mom was like, and he knows? I'm like, oh yeah, he has a girlfriend too, another girlfriend. and my mom didn't understand it, but she tried her best to accept it. When I've explained myself as non-binary, again, my mom didn't necessarily understand it, but what she does understand is that there's too much, what's the word? Too much something put on gender, too much emphasis put on gender. Why do people have to mark their gender on their driver's license? Why do gender bathrooms even really matter when you're going into stalls or it's a single-use washroom or something of that sort? Why does it matter what gender you are when you're in a different profession or that sort of thing? Like, why does it matter? And my mom understands that. It would probably really trip her up at her age to try to refer to me not as her daughter, but as her child only. But she does try. And even my grandmother that I had, my father's mother out west, she passed away quite some time ago. And she used to write me letters, like actually write me letters. And even before I understood who I was, and even as conservative as she was, she had this moment, this realization, because out west, the family is huge. Unfortunately, I'm not really a part of it. I don't know much of it, but between grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren, great-great-great-grandchildren and stuff, she had like 100 descendants and families and stuff. And she said, with that many people in the family, there's going to be something of everything. And I love them all, no matter what. And she was able to say that even from a conservative mind frame. So it's not just the youth who are changing. The youth are helping, the people of older generations to change, to become more accepting. And that's a good thing. So as dire as the situation is becoming, with all the legislation in the states, with the threats of more harm, we have to remember we are winning. We are becoming more accepting. We are becoming more free to be who we are. That the freedom to express who we are, that people are learning at a younger age, and they'll never be able to take that away. So it's important that we keep on fighting back, that we keep on standing strong. And we acknowledge these stories and we go over these stories and we call out the right for what they are. But just know we are winning. Positive progressive change. It's happening. Don't give up hope. Don't get all doomerism. But it's still important to acknowledge these stories, go over the cause and the share and just acknowledge this beautiful child for who they were. Woke ideology. So back to the Independent article here. Last August, a Libs of TikTok post was showing an edited video critical of a public school librarian in Tulsa that led to several consecutive days of bomb threats to schools in the district. Ms. Rychek's anti-LGBTQ posts have been linked to nearly 36 threats made towards school, libraries, hospitals, and businesses across 16 states, according to a recent NBC News investigation. So you see, the thing is that Chaya Rychek likes to claim like, oh, it's not me, I'm the victim in all of this. Yet nearly 36 threats? If I said anything that led to one threat, I'd be reevaluating what I said. Instead, Chaya Rychek is very proud of the work that she's done. She brags about it. So for her to now claim victim is absurd. She knows exactly what she's doing. And partly she's doing this because if it wasn't for the attention she was getting for all of this hate that she's spreading around, she is so unspectacular. She is such a boring, nothing person. No personality, nothing to offer anyone. This is her only way to get noticed, to be relevant. And she's doing it at the cost of the lives of other people. Last month, Oklahoma's Republican Superintendent of Public School, Ryan Walters, appointed Ms. Rychek to the state's Library Advisory Committee. Mr. Walters has not commented publicly on Nex's death. He put out a video on X President's Day decrying radical woke college professors for placing Donald Trump at the bottom of a list of United States' greatest presidents. We judge presidents by outcomes, not woke ideology, he said. And I'm pretty sure that he was at the bottom of the list because they were judging by outcomes. Freedom Oklahoma, an LGBTQ advocacy group, blamed Oklahoma lawmakers and Ms. Rychek for promoting bigotry and intolerance towards trans students after Nex's death. The group said that Ms. Rychek continues to use her platform in a way that leads others to threaten real harm at Oklahoma kids. We want to be clear whether Nex died as a direct result of injuries sustained in the brutal hate-motivated attack at school or not. Nex's death is a result of being the target of physical and emotional harm because of who Nex was, the group wrote. Nex had a light in them that was so bright, that was so big. Since Nex's death, Miss Benedict said she barely slept and been walking in a blur. When it came time to place an obituary, Miss Benedict said she had provided Nex's birth name by accident. This has led to some media coverage of Nex's death using her birth name or dead name. When you are going through something like this and you lose a child, you're not thinking right. We're getting a headstone done and Nex will be on there, she said. Nex's funeral was held at the Maori funeral service on 15th of February. After the service, police officers from Owasso and the neighboring city of Collinsville accompanied members of the local chapters of Bikers Against Child Abuse as they provided an escort from the service to the graveside. So for people who don't know, Bikers Against Child Abuse are bikers, mostly men on motorcycles, who will go and support vulnerable children if they're being harassed or bullied at school. And sometimes they'll just do that by showing up, which, can help boost the confidence of that child and just help make them feel safe. A GoFundMe page set up to help with funeral costs has raised $28,000, and Ms. Benedict said she plans to donate most of the money to the LGBTQ anti-bullying organizations. Nex had a light in them that was so big. They had so many dreams. I want their light to keep shining for everyone. That light was so big and bright and beautiful, and I want everyone to remember Nex that way. So just tragic, tragic story. And here's how a lot of the news sources were covering this story. Is every news source in Oklahoma transphobic garbage? This is really gross. 16-year-old Owasso student who died unexpectedly was laid to rest. 16-year-old Owasso student laid to rest after unexpected death. Owasso High School student laid to rest after unexpected death. Funeral held for 16-year-old Owasso student after unexpected death. From all these different, that's News on 6, Tulsa World, KJRH, and Fox 23. The death was unexpected, but we all know the cause. And none of them are mentioning that. None of them are mentioning why Nex was targeted, that it was the bullying, that it was the violence. Of course, none of them are mentioning that. Oh, no. It's all the same biases that we see in the news time and time again, like even as something with what's happening over in Gaza and how it's always covered from the vantage point of Israel, you know, the harm Hamas is causing Israel, and yet they'll never mention the harm that's being done to the Palestinians. This is the same type of bias going on right here. So Joy Henderson on Twitter, she incited such hatred in a community that a young non-binary Cherokee child was viciously beaten and left to die. So they weren't Cherokee, but they were on the Cherokee Nation and they were indigenous. Some days people need to be called the C word, and this is one of those days. So here's Chaya Rychek crying. You know, the media blamed a murder on me, and now I'm getting death threats. I've been reliably informed this is stochastic terrorism. Yeah. You know, all the stochastic terrorism that I dish out, how dare it comes back to bite me. Yes, Chaya Rychek, stochastic terrorism is happening, but you're the one inflicting it. You're just suffering consequences of inflicting that stochastic terrorism. My heart does not break for you. In Drinnen, it's horrifying that it doesn't seem to occur to Chaya to offer condolences to the family of the non-binary teenager who was reportedly murdered by their classmates in a high school bathroom before she plays the victim card. It does occur to her to misgender them, though. So even after Nex's death, Chaya Rychek is still inflicting harm on this child and on the memory of this child. And this is something that people should just be aware of. So Elizabeth Cadwell had tweeted out, I talked in person to Nex's mother, who said the family is being harassed for using Nex's birth name in their obituary. She asked for understanding because the family was still learning about Nex's preferences. From everything that I've been able to see from the article and stuff, Nex was very supported at home, but the tombstone will have Nex's name on it. But sometimes, you know, you just want a place to grieve without having to answer so many other questions to family members at the same time. Just take that time to grieve. Yeah, heavy story.